meeting of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors will please come to order. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Director Carr? Director Garcia?
Aye. Here. I did it.
Director Gokul Gandhi?
Here.
Director Jackson? Here. Director Leonard?
Here.
Director O'Halloran?
Here.
Director Simpson?
Here.
Director Zomber?
Present.
President Herndon?
Here.
We have 8 board members present.
The chair will now ask the secretary to please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. The chair invites any members of the audience who wish to participate to do so, and asks that those who do not wish to participate please remain silent during the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We acknowledge that Milwaukee lies on traditional Menominee, Potawatomi, and Ho-Chunk homeland along the southwest shores of Lake Michigan, part of North America's largest system of freshwater lakes. On this site, the Milwaukee, Menominee, and Kinnickinnic rivers meet, and the peoples of Wisconsin's Menominee, Ojibwa, Ho-Chunk, Oneida, and Mohegan sovereign nations remain present to this day. This meeting is being conducted in person from the Central Services Building. In order to allow as much public access and participation as possible, this meeting is also being broadcast on WYMS Radio 88.9 FM and via live stream on the MPS website and on the MPS YouTube stream, the links of which may be found on the MPS website on the broadcast page. Before we begin tonight's meeting, we have a short announcement regarding interpretation services for the Spanish-speaking members of our audience.
Buenas tardes y bienvenidos a la Junta Escolar de las Escuelas Públicas de Milwaukee. Si desea escuchar esta reunión en español, por favor llame al 312-626-6799. Nuevamente, 312-626-6799. E introduzca el número de reunión 608-130-5362. Nuevamente, el número de reunión es 608-130-5362. Gracias.
Thank you. Before we move to our agenda, the chair will ask that we share in a moment of silence to commemorate the passing of the following members of the MPS community. Jamilian Brown, a student from James Madison Academic Campus. Demire Bond, a student from North Division High School. Zakira Burris, a student from Vincent High School. Keyshawn Harris, a student from Vincent High School. Russell Hanst, a retired teacher from Milwaukee School of Languages. Samuel A. Molinar, Jr., a student from Riverside High School. Tyrone Reese, a student at River West Elementary School. Andrea Sanders, a student from Riverside High School. John Steffes, a teacher from Lloyd Barbie Montessori. Jawan Taylor, a student in the Milwaukee Virtual Program. If we could observe a moment of silence, please. Thank you very much. Each month, the Milwaukee Board of School Directors accepts the public's input both at the committee's meetings and through correspondence submitted to the Office of Board Governance. As this is the regular monthly meeting of the board, however, in accordance with board rules, The board will not be taking any public testimony on any items during tonight's meeting. Just as a reminder, Robert's Rules of Order dictate that all comments or requests should be directed to the chair, who will determine the most efficient way to address them. Please be respectful of the democratic process adhered to by the board. For the safety of all and to ensure the good order of the meeting, harassment or intimidation tactics of any kind will not be tolerated. Anyone persisting in disrupting this process will be asked to leave or will be escorted from the meeting and will not be allowed to return. Anyone ejected from the meeting may continue to listen to the meeting or access the agenda items online. Also, no one other than members of the board, designated staff, and those who have been invited to present or participate in items of business will be allowed on stage before, during, or after meetings of the board and its committees. Finally, for our listening audience, if you wish to access the evening's agenda items and attachments online, you may do so by visiting the meetings, agendas, and minutes page on the MPS website and choosing online agendas. Now let us begin. Madam Secretary, what is the first item?
The first item on tonight's agenda is action on the minutes of the July 2023 special and regular meetings of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors.
Okay. Are there any reports or corrections to the minutes? We need approval of minutes, right, Madam Secretary?
Madam Chair, if there are no corrections to the minutes are approved as printed.
Okay. If there are no corrections, the minutes are approved as presented.
So
And we
noted.
Okay, we can go to the next one. Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications from the superintendent?
Yes, Madam President, we do have one communication, and that is the monthly report with possible action from the Superintendent of Schools. And this is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Thank you. Will the superintendent please present the report?
Good evening, President Herndon and members of the board. Keith Posley, Superintendent of Schools. As we begin the 2023-2024 school year, I would like to share some of the highlights to date. Our Freshman Bridge program, where our current 9th grade students participated in high school orientation, started the school year in a positive way as the class of 2027 transitioned from middle school. We want them to learn about their school courses as well as opportunities to participate in extracurriculars. I would like to give a shout out to Parkview Elementary School, where students developed and implemented a project to focus on kindness and compassion. Our Parkview students collected and donated blankets to organizations supporting mothers with newborns, as well as young patients with cancer. We celebrate leadership and service for our students starting at a very young age. Earlier this month, GE Healthcare volunteers refreshed and updated the classrooms, hallways, and playgrounds at several MPS schools for Community Day of Service. In addition, GE Healthcare also gave schools $4,000 for project supplies. I extend a heartfelt thank you to GE for the over 1,000 dedicated volunteers for supporting our schools and young people each year. We continue strengthening academic program in the district. The school year started with the newest international baccalaureate programming at 3 elementary schools, Elba, Marvin E. Pratt, and Gibbet Stewart. This brings our total IB schools to 11 locations. We are proud to increase rigorous programming throughout the district. As you are aware, our early calendar school started on August 14th. I would like to thank all of you board members for your help as we welcome our students, staff, and families at Bayview High School. We anticipate our remaining traditional calendar schools start bright and early on Tuesday, September 5th. I will say to any families, there's still space to enroll if you have not already done so. As always, we know our Milwaukee families and caregivers we want to thank them for making Milwaukee Public Schools a school of choice, and we take pride in serving our children. Please see my full report for additional details. Thank you, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Are there any more reports or communications? And if from the Board Clerk, Chief Officer, and Offices of Board Governance?
Madam Chair, yes, I do. There are 2 reports from the office, but before we move to those, do board members have questions about the superintendent's report? Hearing none, the next item would be the first report, which is communication from the Office of Board Governance, and that is action on a request to retire to closed session for consideration of and possible action on employment, compensation, and performance evaluation data relative to the Board Clerk, Chief Officer, Office of Board Governance, and the Superintendent of Schools. The recommendation is that the board retire to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 19.85, parent 1, parent C.
Thank you. This item will be deferred to the end of the meeting.
So noted. The next communication would be the monthly report with possible action on the legislative activities affecting Milwaukee Public Schools. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Mr. Thiel is here to give the report.
Mr. Thiel, go ahead, please.
President Herndon, members of the board, Chris Thiel, Office of Governmental Relations, with the monthly update. As you see in the attachment, and as the district, the board, the administration has been focused on very heavily over the past several months and years, the Wisconsin Policy Forum has come out with a very helpful report focused on teacher turnover and attrition in the state of Wisconsin. The reason, I mean, always having factual information is very helpful. But in this instance, in this moment, it's particularly helpful as we have the balance of the legislative session before us, and the state is sitting on a balance, including its rainy day fund, of roughly $6 billion. That item is in the attachment as well from the Legislative Fiscal Bureau. They still have to do some of their year-end work to tabulate some numbers, so we may see an update to that figure, but as we have it now, between balance and the rainy day fund, the state has $6 billion on hand with which it could fund schools and certainly attend to some of the issues raised by the Wisconsin Policy Forum report. This board, our legislative agenda, has emphasized policies such as the Teacher Pledge Program at the University of Wisconsin, where the state has a constitutional responsibility to educate our students and therefore has a constitutional responsibility to make sure that we have professional educators in our classrooms. States like Michigan very recently have directly funded efforts to create more teachers and retain teachers to keep them in the classroom. So this is a policy issue that's front and center and frankly should take precedent, in our view, over some of the other policies that have been proposed, namely, you may have seen recently, the issue of a tax cut in some shape and form is once again on the table. There is a proposal to implement a $2.9 billion tax cut, again at the state. As you know, at the end of the budget season, the governor used his veto pen to eliminate a portion of a tax cut that he found to be irresponsible. And certainly with the many needs, whether it be in the area of teachers, special education that remains underfunded, the fact that the state of Wisconsin has not provided a per pupil adjustment that's kept pace with inflation for 16 years, those are priorities given the state's constitutional responsibility. So just wanted to highlight that report. A couple of other things that have developed over the last couple of weeks. We were part of a fiscal transparency committee under Act 89. In the last legislative session, the legislature was looking for an easier way to provide information to the public with school board finances. As we know, as you've certainly had experience, there are a lot of elements. Some parts are very simple, but certainly there are a lot of details in school finance. And so the idea was to make sure that we had an opportunity to put something of a dashboard, as it was being called, in front of the public so they can understand how the money worked. One of the elements in there that was highlighted, especially now with the expansion of the parental choice program across the state, is the fact, as we have discussed for years, that the DPI in its reporting includes funds that flow through our district under federal law to the roughly 27,000 students in the Milwaukee Parental Choice Program, whether it be Title I or funding under IDEA. But there's some element of confusion there because the state currently reports all of that money as going to our students. So one part of the dashboard that we thought would be useful for all districts would be to discern what money goes where, so there's no confusion about per pupil funding. There's an issue has been raised about including that detail by the Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce and some other folks, where apparently that's a little too transparent. And so that discussion is ongoing at the state level as well. There's one other piece that I should highlight that was brought to my attention this afternoon. There's going to be an editorial in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. This is an age-old issue, wherein it is stated that public school districts have a financial incentive to identify students as having a disability. That's been untrue ever since it was first stated. As this board well knows, and as has been a priority for us and all of our neighbors, the state of Wisconsin only reimburses 30% of costs for special education. That's the opposite of a financial incentive. We know we have a responsibility to educate and care for our students, and we take that seriously. But for anyone to suggest that public schools are somehow incentivized to identify students as having a disability is highly irresponsible and should be questioned and called out every time that comes up. So I'm just raising that now because, again, we're going to have to push back and clarify as that statement will be published. So those are the updates for this evening. Happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you very much. Do board members wish to make any comments? Director O'Halloran.
Thank you. I'm hoping you might know it's not in the report, but on Tuesday we had a very good discussion about at the SASE committee about the foundations of literacy, and one of the we talked about the number of teachers who have been trained on the letters curriculum, and one of the reasons why we can't expand it to more was because we were concerned about funding, but with Act 20, I believe there might be a push to have more districts use that. Do you know if they might reach into that $6 billion pot that they're sitting on and perhaps consider helping districts with this great program that is showing great results throughout the country?
President Herndon, Director O'Halloran, there was a robust discussion during the budget about this reading initiative, and $50 million was placed, a temporary, not an ongoing, a one-time amount of $50 million was put in the budget, so that will lapse. As part of those discussions, it was pointed out, as you just have, that it takes substantial investment and substantial ongoing investment if we're going to bring literacy coaches in and other experts in to help educate staff in these methods. And they reached a high funding mark of $50 million, which on the one hand, $50 million can sound like a lot of money. On the other hand, we've got 850,000 public school students across the state, and they have put limitations on the disbursement of funds to support literacy coaches. So even though we have a district of our size, the number of literacy coaches, I don't want to mistake this, but it's capped in the neighborhood of 5, I believe, maybe slightly more. I could be wrong or corrected. The issue is, as proponents of this initiative have actually pointed out, that it's the training, it's the curriculum, and then you're looking for experts when we talk about literacy coaches who are expert educators who are also expert in educating other adults. So this is not a snap your fingers and it happens situation, and that's a very long answer to your question, and which ultimately is no. Nobody has discussed any funds on top of that $50 million.
Do you have a follow-up?
No, not at this time.
Thank you. Are there any other board members Director Leonard?
So more like voicing frustration. And I know you didn't bring up I read the whole affidavit for the Supreme Court with regarding the gerrymandering. And it's sort of amazing that we even discuss this politely, I'll be honest with you. I find this sort of ridiculous. There is no question in my mind that when almost 56% of people vote for a new Chief Justice for our state Supreme Court, with the understanding that that person is going to resolve a lot of these issues, including public school funding to a certain degree, I'm not surprised that state legislators are doing everything in their power to use technicalities. That's basically what it really is. Technicalities to find a way to impeach her and remove her. And I think that I feel like we really need to alarm people and wake them up, because there's a tendency to be really like, oh, well, they just have all this money. And people come to me and say, MPS has $1 billion. Well, let's be honest. The truth is, we could use double that, and that probably be close to that if we had been given the right amount of money over the past 16 years to match up with what our students need. But I'm glad, I appreciate the detail of the report. I will use it as effectively as I can. I like to argue with people about this because I get it. I get hit a lot with it. They're so convinced that I had a parent the other day at one of the open houses saying, but you're going to get $325 per student. And when I got done explaining that the way the shared revenue formula works, we get $7 per student. That worked. That parent was openly upset, and I think we need to gear up our parents. We need to take it seriously. I'm an organizer at heart, and I know how to get people going if I have to, and I think it's necessary that people are aware of the risks that are coming to our district. I'm sort of blown away by it. I'll be honest with you. I'm hot under the collar about it. I'm amazed that we even are tolerating this, but I don't know what else we can do. Sorry, just had to say that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any more directors that wish to speak? By the way, I certainly support your sentiment. Okay, Madam Secretary, let's move to the next item.
The next item is a report with possible action on the activities of the Office of Accountability and Efficiency. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Would the Office of Accountability and Efficiency please present your report?
Thank you, Chair Herndon. Matt Chasen, Office of Accountability and Efficiency. That report is before you. I'll just briefly highlight the work of the Contract Compliance Services team that exists in the OIE over the summer. They were able to line up 80 student internship opportunities in alignment with the board policy that directs that office, basically to find career and educational opportunities in the contractual relationships we have with vendors. They were able to place students in administrative services, agricultural services, architecture, carpentry, technology, and tutoring services, and I really want to acknowledge the passion of the team for their work in this space. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Do board members have questions or comments? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item is action on the reports of the independent hearing officers of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors.
Thank you. The chair will entertain a motion to accept, modify, or reject the reports of the independent hearing officers of the dates and times listed in our agenda. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Madam Chair, we do need a motion.
Director O'Halloran.
I move approval.
We need a second.
Before there's a second, Director O'Halloran, is that a motion to accept, reject, or modify the report?
Accept the reports that are before the committee or before the board.
Thank you.
We need a second at this time.
I
Director
second.
Leonard.
I second.
Thank you. Will the secretary please call the roll?
On Director O'Halloran's motion to accept the reports of the independent hearing officers of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors, seconded by Director Leonard. On the motion as read, Director Carr?
Aye.
Director Garcia?
Aye.
Director Gopal Gandhi?
Aye.
Director Jackson?
Aye.
Director Leonard?
Aye.
Director O'Halloran?
Aye.
Director Simpson?
Aye.
Director Zomber?
Aye.
President Herndon?
Aye.
That's 9 ayes, the motion passes.
We will now have the reports of the standing committees. Since public hearing was given at the committee meetings, the board, which is customary, will not be giving public hearing on these reports this evening. Madam Secretary, what is the first report?
The first report is that of the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel. No items of this report have been set aside for separate consideration.
Thank you. Do any board members wish any of these items to be set aside? Seeing no hands, Madam Secretary.
So noted.
What is the next report?
The next report is that of the Committee on Legislation, Rules, and Policies. No items of this report have been set aside for separate consideration.
Do any members wish to set aside any of these items? Okay, Madam Secretary, what is the next report?
The next report is that of the Committee on Parent and Community Engagement. No items of this report has been set aside for separate consideration.
Do board members wish to add any items to be set aside? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, what is the next report?
The next report is that of the Committee on Parent and Community Engagement. No items of this report have been set aside for separate consideration.
Do any board members wish any of these items to be set aside? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, next report.
The next report is that of the Committee on Student Achievement and School Innovation. No items of this report have been set aside for separate consideration.
Do any members wish any items to be set aside? Okay, Madam Secretary, next item, please.
There are no reports of the balance to be considered, but for formalities, to approve the reports of the standing committees as presented. That would be the motion before the board.
May I please have a motion on the balance of the committee's reports? Director Gopal Gandhi.
I move that we accept the balance of the reports in the committees.
We need a second. Director Simpson.
I'll second that.
On the motion as read into the record,
Thank you. Will the secretary please call the roll?
so noted. On Director Gopal Gandhi's motion, seconded by Director Simpson. Director Carr.
Aye.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gopal Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Jackson.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Director Zomber.
Aye.
Chair Herndon.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes, the motion passes.
Madam Secretary, are there any items of regular business?
Yes, Madam Chair, we do have 2 items of regular business, and the first is the report of the board's delegates.
Would any of the delegates like to make any remarks? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, what is the next item of regular business?
The next item of regular business is a report of the President of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors.
Thank you. That report is in the agenda tonight if anyone wishes to read it. Madam Secretary, is there any unfinished business before the board?
We have no unfinished business.
Are there any items of new business for referral to committee, Madam Secretary?
Madam President, we have no items of new business for referral.
Madam Secretary, are there any communications for referral to committee?
Yes, Madam Chair, we do have one communication for referral, and that is Communication 2324C-1 from the K-12 Civics Action Team on communication after traumatic events.
Thank you. This communication will be referred to the superintendent.
So noted.
Madam Secretary, are there any resolutions for referral to committee?
Madam Chair, we have no resolutions.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
Madam Chair, we are back to the item that was previously deferred. Action on a request to retire to closed session for consideration of and possible action on employment, compensation, and performance evaluation data relative to the Board Clerk, Chief Officer, Office of Board Governance, and the Superintendent of Schools. The recommendation is that the board retire to closed session for consideration of this item.
I will now entertain a motion to retire to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85 paren 1 paren C for the purpose of considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the board has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. May I have a motion, please? Director Simpson.
I move that we retire to executive session.
Thank you.
Director Herndon?
Director Jackson.
I second that motion.
Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
On Director Simpson's motion to retire to executive session, seconded by Director Jackson. On the motion as
We never congratulated those that were promoted. Some of them are in the audience.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The board will now retire to closed session pursuant. Okay. I'm sorry we interrupted that vote. Okay. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
on Director Simpson's motion, seconded by Director Jackson. Director Carr.
Aye.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Jackson.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Director Zomber.
Aye.
And President Herndon.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes. The motion passes.
Thank you. The board will now retire to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, paren 1, paren C, as described. The board may return to open session to take action on matters discussed in closed session. Otherwise, the board will adjourn from closed session. Madam Secretary, please note the time.
So noted.